Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Humanity First. My name is Peter Evers, and I am the host of the show. And today, as we approach the final days before the holidays, we wanted to talk a bit about the holidays in general. And we're going to have a couple of guests a little bit later on in the show who are going to talk about two particular populations and a couple of issues that are going on in the world at the moment. And the first one is we're going to have Mary Corlin, who's been on this show before, to talk about the program at BAMSI, which is the COPE program that does a lot of harm reduction work. And we just want to talk a little bit about the issue of substance misuse in America, specifically around the holidays, and what perhaps some of the causes of that are with people who struggle with the disease of addiction. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the LGBTQ population and the holidays and the trans population and some of the issues that particular population face around celebrating holidays, because there are many things that sort of bear down on those folks, such as rejection by family, that kind of thing, and what we can do to help people through difficult periods, and what we can do to support people who are struggling with addiction and homelessness around the times of the holidays. It is a time when people tend to think about those less well off than themselves, but maybe a little bit about what we can do and how we can help. So we'll welcome in Todd and Mary in a couple of minutes, and we'll have a great conversation. So we'll be right back.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Humanity First. My name is Peter Evers, and we have a couple of guests who are no strangers to our podcasts here. We have Mary Corlin, who is our Director of Harm Reduction Services, and Todd Foy, who's also been on the show before, who is our Senior Director of HIV Services. Hi, guys. How are you?
Good. Hi. Thank you for having us, Peter.
Good to have you. And we thought it might be good to have a timely discussion about the holidays. And I know that people all over the world, in Christian countries and also in Hindu countries, because let's not forget Diwali and Hanukkah, which is actually happening right now, I believe. So there's an awful lot of celebrating going on at the moment, a lot of giving thanks, and a lot of getting together of people with loved ones and friends. And the overall feeling about this time of year is of one of hope and one of happiness and one of sharing with family members. It's not like that for everybody. In fact, it's not. I would say there's an awful lot of people who don't have an experience of what the holidays are like, that you switch on the TV. I have to admit, I switched on the television yesterday, and Love Actually was on, and it seems to be on all the time. And Hugh Grant, I find particularly annoying. But a story of wonder and love and everything works out in the end. That's not real life. And the work that you do, that you folks do, is really at the sharp end of people who don't necessarily have a typical journey through life because of a struggle with addiction, for instance, and also the LGBTQ population, who have many have struggled with other people accepting identity, and therefore the creation of fissures, if you like, in families. And so perhaps those holidays do not have some of the resounding joy that we are all expected to have, and I think there is a big expectation for that. So maybe let's start with the disease of addiction and substance use disorder, substance misuse. Mary, your work in harm reduction is really right at the coalface of making sure that we are providing every service possible that we can to a population who struggles with the stigma of conventional wisdom sometimes about people who are in the throes of this disease. Are the holidays a tough period of time for the folks that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, I know, most people think of the holiday season as a time for celebration, a time of joy. But unfortunately, for people that are experiencing substance use disorder, mental health issues, or homelessness, they don't have the same feelings towards the holidays sometimes. And that can be for one of many reasons. Some people are spending the holidays in treatment. And I can tell you from my own lived experience that spending the holiday you know, in a treatment facility is not warm and fuzzy. Having your family come visit for the 1 hour they're allowed to come visit doesn't bring the joy that the holiday should bring. Some of us aren't even lucky enough to have family that will visit. Some people are cut off from their family members, so they're alone on the holidays. I think that's one of the things that can be the most difficult, is being isolated during the holidays. And we have social media now, so you can see other people sharing pictures of them with their family members, and it can just be a very difficult time. Yes.
Yeah, and particularly because again there are expectations, and so you get. I used to work at a detox in Roxbury, and it's not the greatest place to be on April 17th, right? And people are often beginning their journeys of recovery, and people are struggling with depression. I mean, I don't know what you feel, but having been in clinical practice for a long time, I don't think there are too many people who don't have depression who are in the throes of addiction because of the barriers that disease has put up for people. But it really is more, as you said, more concentrated, right, over the holidays. And is there a sort of dread and fear for some folks about the approaching holiday, in terms of, oh, this is something more difficult that I'm going to have to go through? I wish it wasn't the holidays. I wish it was a regular day.
Yeah, I think weeks leading up to the holidays, people start to get anxious and stressed out, and start to worry about how the holiday season is going to go, because they may be seeing family members. Not every family has the best dynamic. Most families have their own issues. We have the saying, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. And most people feel obligated, if they're able to attend family functions and get-togethers. And I know from experience, my family has had to make changes to accommodate myself and other members of my family's recovery, and they were respectful, and I was lucky in that way. But not all families have that thought. They don't even think about it. So celebrations typically have, alcohol is the most common, but also other drugs as a part of a way to celebrate the holidays. And for people that are early in recovery, that can be very difficult. For people that are using and know that they have to hide it from their family, that can be very difficult. And again, it's not just, the one holiday out of the year. It's weeks leading up to it. They're worrying about these things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would guess, well, I think that people are more at risk of picking up, more at risk of having a bump in the road, if you like, of their own recovery. When, I mean, you put the TV on, and actually, this is probably true of all times. You put TV on, and the commercials come on, and there are young people, and they're dancing, and they're having fun. And I had this discussion with my son a while ago. And he said, yeah, in his generation, he's 30 years old, his generation, he said, sometimes I feel like what's thrown at you is you can only have fun if you're drinking alcohol, and there's something wrong with you if you don't. So it's sort of creating a social norm that in order to have fun, you have to drink. And yet, we're well aware of what the consequences are of younger people being exposed to alcohol and drugs, that they're much more at risk in terms of a developing brain and all of those things. And yet people who are in recovery, and being in recovery is delicate, right? Especially in the early days, are being exposed to that. There are expectations about that. Do more people struggle with using over that period than any other time of the year, would you say?
I'd say any time where a person is put under more stress than usual is a time that they'll typically use more substances, because they're trying to numb the stress, numb the pain, numb the depression, all of those things. And we know that these are all things that happen during the holidays. So it definitely, you'll see a rise in the amount of substances that people use, or people that don't typically use substances that do around the holidays, because it's kind of expected. You go to holiday parties and they have, drinks. It's funny, like some families have alcoholic beverages that they have like an emotional attachment to, like, oh, we have to make grandma's sangria, and and everybody, let's all cheers and have, so it can be very difficult. People are trying to, people are using typically because they're in pain, and it can be a very painful time of the year. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's pivot a little bit, Todd. As we talk about people who are at risk, there are particular members of our culture, of our population, who are at risk because of the stigma and because of the negativity that we see. And actually, I'll just talk about trans people, because there is, and we've talked about this before, but there's an awful lot of legislation around at the moment in many states. And by the way, I think there's 9 in Massachusetts. So when we think of ourselves as a state that is extremely accepting and liberal, we are, but yet there are pockets within this state of resistance to people's existence, I guess I would say. All of that, and situations where families have rejected people, and that is still the story that's alive and well in our culture. The holidays are a high risk time for the LGBTQ plus population too, right?
Yeah, I would agree for many of the same, reasons that Mary outlined. And I think something she said that kind of resonated with me too is that even if, I think there's different levels and dynamics, right? So for many years, personally, I did not go home for the holidays, right? I actually left home the day before Thanksgiving in 2006 because, my parents were like, we don't, we don't believe in that. We don't believe in this. And so for me, Thanksgiving has always kind of had that sort of tarnish to it, right? And that relationship has healed over many years with some family members. But I think there's this layer too, where, even if you are then going to see your family, there's still this level of like concealing that goes on, right? Like, can you tone it down? Can you, not bring a partner home? Can you not bring that here? Right. And so then that also triggers these feelings of, well, I may be surrounded by people, but I'm still feeling isolated. I'm still feeling not true to myself. I'm not feeling accepted, right? And so I think in the same way that, Mary was talking about, families have to make changes or they don't altogether, to accommodate folks that have that experience. It's still tough. It's hard. You're like, and so I think especially for LGBTQ plus folks, such as myself, having to, put yourself in scenarios like that to tone down who you are, right? And to not be able to bring home loved ones or things like that, it's challenging. And then that triggers, relapse or engaging in things, because you're just like, I got to cope with this somehow. Right. So I think that's really an important piece, is that even in celebrating with your family, there are still possibly feelings of isolation and not belonging.
Right. And, when we talk about being inclusive, we talk about creating an environment where people don't have to be different from themselves, but that environment accepts those people. And when you talk about advice to families, I actually because we're doing the watching Christmas movie thing at the moment at home, we watched one that I'd never seen with Sarah Jessica Parker and called The Stone Family. I don't know if you've seen it, and it's a good movie actually, because and in that movie, one of the sons is gay and brings home his boyfriend, and Sarah Jessica Parker sort of makes a statement. I don't know if you remember this, Todd, but makes this statement about, well, you couldn't possibly want your child to be gay, could you? And it was really interesting, wasn't it? Because I don't think her character actually meant that to be a terrible thing, but the way that unfolded I thought that was really real. That people were just really offended by that. What about advice to families, Todd, and Mary, in terms of coming home, of making your home an inclusive one? How would you address that?
I mean, my feedback's probably similar, but I mean, shorter. I think you hit an important point I was actually talking about that scene with a friend like 2 days ago.
Oh.
That's funny to me, but it highlights an important point about sort of the microaggressions that may occur, the terminology, the things that are said that can trigger, that can upset a person. Right. And so, I think for me, it's just sort of, be open to being corrected as well. Like, hey, that didn't sit right with me. Can we maybe not do that, or, not use that terminology, and it doesn't need to be a whole thing at the dinner table, go get a roll from the kitchen and just say, hey, that didn't sit right. So I think, creating an environment where people are open to being corrected, to make the safe space for people, because I don't think any space is always 100%. There's always that 0.1, something could still happen, right? Even with the best of us. And so I think being open to being corrected and taking pointers, hey, this isn't going to work, I think is probably one of the best things that people can do, and just take that space, walk away, remove yourself, right? And then try to re-engage.
I love that advice, because, the other thing about Thanksgiving and the holidays is that, you don't usually get 3 or maybe 4 generations in the same room at one time. And the generational differences are the things oftentimes that spark that kind of thing. I mean, that how many times have I heard that expression, we don't believe in that, which is just hilarious if you actually think about it. It's like, it's not about believing in, it is, and there's a line of a song that says, in the end, compassion is the greatest family value. I think it's also acceptance, right? It is accepting people for who they are, their authentic self, and recognizing the needs of everybody. And Mary, how about you? What sort of advice would you give?
So you kind of just hit what I was thinking. Just being considerate of what's going on in others' lives. So if that means, we don't drink from 2 to 5, because that's when Uncle Bob is coming to visit and he's sober and he's struggling a bit, and we don't want to have that in the environment while he's here. Or that may be understanding that some people won't be able to come for the holidays. I think that we know that triggers are people, places, and things. And sometimes those people, places, and things are our family members, our homes, and, family gatherings. And I think it's important for people to understand that they don't have to go to events if it's going to put themselves at risk. And I think it's important for family members to understand that it's okay for them to skip a year or to skip a gathering. It's not the end of the world if they don't come for Christmas. If that's going to make them safer, then, just be considerate and compassionate, and understand that, this can be a really difficult time. It's not always all cheer and joy for everybody. So just being considerate and compassionate.
I think that's lovely advice. I also think, when we think about us as humans, what are the things that are precious to us? Give a thought about what is precious to our identity, who we are, the group that we run with, and what is precious to somebody in the early stages of recovery is, their recovery, their journey, the beginning of a journey, which ultimately begins to, turn your life around. When you talk in those terms, it's easy for somebody else who is not in those shoes to say, well, I know what's precious to me. I know that my identity is really important to me. Think about it a little bit and think about, this idea of inclusivity and acceptance and compassion. And those are things really that, we should be celebrating at any holiday period, whether you're religious or not. They're the foundation of humanity. They're the foundation of what allows us to love each other. And I would always say that it doesn't matter if it's not about addiction, it's not about sexuality, it's about human beings. And there's lots of people who are going home these holidays, dreading going home for lots of different reasons. And it's always worth thinking about that your holiday is your holiday. It doesn't have to look like somebody else's. It doesn't have to look like The Family Stone or any of those movies. It is the journey that you take as individuals and as families and as friends and as groups of people. And there's plenty of room for that. And so thank you so much, Todd and Mary. It's been really great to chat about this, and it's really important subject, just to sort of stop and think a little bit about what the holiday season means to everybody. I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Bye, everybody, and happy holidays.
You as well.